How's it going, guys? And welcome to an exclusive first look at the Knafs Co Lander. Oh yeah. And trust me, you guys are gonna want this thing. Since this is the first video on the yet to be released Lander, we're gonna kick it off with some key specifications. All the information is down in the description, as well as a link to the Kickstarter. And for my friends that don't measure in hamburgers, I did the conversions for you. With an overall length of 6.375 inches, the Lander is decidedly a more compact EDC knife. The 2.75-inch drop point blade comes in D2 and does provide a sizable cutting area with a slicey, flat grind. Now, if you're like me, all these numbers don't mean much without a ruler and a quick reference to your knife collection. So I thought I'd save you a trip to Mathtown. As you guys know, I have a medium-sized hand, and this is what the Lander looks like in my hand. Fits pretty well. Here's what the Lander looks like in a bigger hand, or should I say, ham hand. And here's what it looks like in a smaller hand. Here's the Lander next to some popular knives for size reference. Next to the mini Bugout, you'll notice the Lander is actually just a little bit smaller. Funny enough though, both me and Jamie noticed that the Lander fit better in our hand. We think it's because the Lander allows you to grip a little bit farther forward with your front finger on the handle than the mini Bugout does. And here it is next to the Civivi Baby Banter. And finally, next to the Launch 4. We all know the Launch 4 is a very small knife, so you can see that the Lander is a compact knife, but not tiny. So what we have on paper is a great addition to the EDC pocket knife world. We've got a dream list of budget materials, great fit and finish, great action, what some would call a practically perfect pocket clip, and you get all this for $58. I mean, that's Civivi Elementum territory. That's exactly where I'd put the Lander. You could go down in the description, click the link to the Kickstarter, and set yourself up with a really sweet knife right now, which you should do. But if you do that, you're gonna miss out on why the Lander is not only a unique knife, but why it's a great knife. Now, great is a big old word, but I really mean it when I'm talking about the Lander, because the Lander is specifically designed to be a knife that you can own end to end. And what that means is it was designed for you to take it apart. It was designed for you to tinker with it. It was designed for you to be able to just completely change its aesthetic profile. That becomes most obvious when we look at the scales. Let me show you what I mean. When we look at the scales, we see that there are these 4 screws in the scale that go into the body here, and then we have the pivot. Now this is something that's really, really cool, is the Lander is designed for you to just remove these 4 screws and the scale will pop off. No consideration for your locking mechanism, no consideration for your pivot, nothing like this. I mean, this really makes Knife 101, right? Like knife modding 101, super, super simple. And you know, Knafs and Ben didn't come up with this idea. This is something that you do see sometimes in the knife world, but it's pretty rare. So I've loosened all the screws. I'm just leaving the pocket clip holder screws in. And you can see here, we're just gonna lift this off, boom. So scales off. I didn't have to mess with my lock. I didn't have to mess with my pivot. Really, really cool stuff. And like I said, this is something that has existed. It's pretty rare, like you don't see it very often, but the cool thing about it is this embodies kind of the entire philosophy, and this is something that's near and dear to my heart, and this is something that expands well outside of the knife world for me, and that's the idea of the right to repair. And it's something that Ben's really been on a lot lately as well, and that's why we're seeing it in the Lander. Again, a knife that you can own end to end. So knife modding 101, pull scales off, modify somehow. So Knafs is actually going to have custom scales. They're going to have blank scales so you can make your own custom scales. They're gonna have all of these parts available in the United States at Ben's facility. It's just his garage right now. Or if you lose a screw or you lose a bushing or you lose whatever, he's gonna have parts that you can order from him and replace immediately. And the raddest thing about this, and the thing that kind of personifies the biggest bit of this philosophy, is that on launch, they're actually gonna be providing a CAD file for the scales. So it's gonna be open source, Creative Commons 4.0. That means that anybody will immediately have access to all of the CAD information for the scales, which is really exciting. So from day one, there's no guessing, there's no measuring, there's no, oh, maybe this will fit, fitment tests, stuff like that. from day one, if you want to 3D print some scales, if you want to CNC some scales, if you want to have somebody make you some scales, whatever it is, that file is completely available and free for you to use. It's something really special. It's something you just don't see, not just in the knife world very often, it's something you just don't see in the world very often. So I've been taking some of the screws apart on this side. Now you can see on this side of the pivot, this is the side of the pivot that does have the screw for the pivot, where you can tighten it down, you know, pick how tight you want the knife to be or not be. But watch as I remove the last screw to the scale. We're gonna see the exact same thing that we saw on the other side. Scale comes right off. I didn't have to touch the pivot at all. A lot of you guys have asked me in the past about dyeing scales and stuff like that, because I've done some tutorial videos on it. And the reality is like, this knife is gonna be probably one of the easiest knives for you to mod if you're new to modding, or if you're new even just to the knife world. Now, when we were talking specs, this wasn't something that I touched on a ton, but this is actually skeletonized into the G10, which is pretty rad. Again, at $58. But yeah, I wonder if it, I mean, it's still a knife skeletonized. It would be really cool to see somebody come up with just like an ultralight pair of scales for this thing to basically just like maintain the skeletonized look and feel of it as it is right now. So that's what I'm gonna be looking for, guys. Now, some of you might be noticing that none of the hardware has any Loctite on it. That is because there are only 2 landers in existence right now, literally only 2 in the world. And Ben was gracious enough to let us borrow this one to show it off to you guys. From factory, all the hardware will come with blue Loctite, again, with the thought in mind that you're going to modify, you're gonna take it apart, you're gonna tinker, you're gonna figure out how everything works. And just like that, we're back together. We didn't have to worry about tightness in the pivot, we didn't have to worry about blade center, and we didn't have to worry about our locking mechanism, because the way this comes apart, you don't have to. Now, if you wanted to take that stuff apart, of course, 100% you can take that stuff apart and give it a deep clean or whatever you want to do. And that's something that I think is really unique about the whole idea around the lander, is we just don't see a lot of things in our world that are designed for us to be kind of physically curious about, right? We have all these like physical artifacts in our world, like, you know, electronics or whatever it may be, but there's a lot of things that prevent us from diving in. And that's something that I love that Ben built into this thing, that Knafs Co built into this thing, is that it's meant to be curious. It's meant to pique your interest. It's meant for you to ask questions, right? And on the note of asking questions, Ben will actually be down in the comments of this video. So if you have a specific question about Ben, or about the design process on this, or about the lander, or about whatever, ask it down in the comments. He's gonna be paying attention. Now, before we hand the lander back over, we have one more thing we need to do with it.
Guidance is internal. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour.
It only seemed right to end this review of the lander in its natural habitat. So here we are, just above the Kármán line. I've had the opportunity to carry the lander in my pocket for the last few days, and I can confidently say that it is a great addition to the budget compact EDC knife category. Not just that, but it's a great addition to the knife world because of everything that it espouses, right? The name lander after the moon lander. When the first moon landing happened, they had lost their navigation systems, and so they actually had to take ownership of that vehicle and land it themselves. And that's kind of what Ben's doing as well, right? Like, he left his job in corporate America just recently. He's giving us this rad knife. He's just like taking ownership, right? He has ownership in something. And it's also kind of what the knife gives us as people who buy it and who use it. It's about owning your knife end to end. And that's such a Ben thing to do, is to like build in this idea of systems and just have it like spread across everything that he's touching at one time. Now, you guys know that I'm really good friends with Ben. If you guys have followed me for any time, you know that I've reviewed a lot of Knife Friends knives, and some of them are for me, some of them are not. I'll say if they're for me or if they're not. The lander is definitely for me. I'm really, really excited to get one in my pocket and get it in the regular rotation. I hope from this video that you've been able to at least think about owning your stuff. You think about like being more engaged in the things around you, repairing things. Also, you know, just the idea of like knife modification, you know, to keep it simple. At minimum, I hope that you got this from this video. But also, I hope that like if this is something that you're into, or if you have somebody who's like looking for a new knife or a new knife owner, or somebody looking to get into knife knife modding, I hope that you'll consider the lander in that because it's such a great knife for that. So there's a link down in the description that goes to the Kickstarter so you can get your own lander, or if you're watching this way in the future, there's a link to Knafs Co's website where you can pick up your own lander as well. And I think that's it for me. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you liked it, please subscribe, like, share, all that stuff, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.